Coming at number 5, we've got the Golden Eagle. With a name like that, you'd assume it's just some dad's wicked old muscle car. Not quite though. It's a 1964 Dodge 330 and it's gone through the hands of many people. The transfer from owner to owner is rarely peaceful though. This car is known for its tendency to kill people. And we're not just talking about unfortunate accidents and collisions, it caused death to all those who owned it, usually in very odd and violent ways. Originally, it was a police cruiser. Patrolmen and the like would bring it out for their daily activities. The first person assigned to the car was killed relatively quickly. Then 2 more officers got a chance at driving it and they were killed as well. The weird thing is, all the deaths were gruesome murder-suicides. Not a great start for this vehicle, eh? Well, after seeing it happen thrice, the folks at the police station had seen enough. They took the car off the force and sold it off to a young family. Interestingly, the family didn't seem to have any issues with this cursed car, but that didn't stop it from killing. No. It refrained from ending the lives of its drivers at the time, but when neighbors learned about its history, they took up arms. During the night, many would attempt to vandalize the car, but it would not be stopped. Many who attempted to damage the vehicle ended up perishing in unexplained ways. There was nothing to directly connect these things to the car, but those who did mess with it often got messed up. Eventually, it was decided that enough was enough and the car was brought to the impound lot. This led to it being chopped up into pieces, and somehow, this still wasn't the end. The car still rides in some capacity. A lot of the parts stripped from the impounded Gold Eagle were used to build another car. At this point, we're entering Ship of Theseus territory, and we have to decide whether or not that means that the Gold Eagle still is rolling around or if it's a whole new thing. After a supposed 14 deaths, it's probably for the best that the original car is retired. Nobody's reported any new incidents related to it, but who knows? All in due time. Coming in number 4, we've got James Dean's Porsche 550 Spyder. A classic tale like no other, many think that Dean's unfortunate passing was a result of reckless driving. And if the story had stopped there, that's probably what it would have been chalked up to. However, the 2-seater that would become famously known as Little Bastard made sure to cause plenty of trouble in the years following the original accident. Our story starts with James Dean, legendary actor and racing enthusiast. Considering a career in motorsport to go along with his acting, he entered many races and did quite well. After being barred from racing during the filming of one of his movies, he wanted to get back out there as soon as possible. Trading in his Speedster for the now infamous 1955 Porsche 550 Spyder, he was ready to roll. Wanting to break the car in before racing it, he decided to drive it all the way from LA to Salinas. During this trip, he crashed into a turning vehicle, flipping the Spyder and sending his passenger flying. Dean remained inside the car, tumbling about, and was killed almost instantly. The car was totaled, but there were bits that could be saved. The engine and drivetrain were salvaged and sold to a duo of doctors who were into similar races. After integrating these parts into their own cars, the doctors entered a race and both crashed. One of the two actually died as a result of their accident. At this point, the car was going to be made an example of. While in storage, waiting to be used as warning for student drivers, the garage it was kept in burned down. Then, in a comedy of errors, the car was brought to multiple different schools and caused problems at each one. First, it fell off the truck that was carrying it. Then it tipped over and broke a student's hip. And finally, some thieves tried to steal the blood-stained seats and steering wheel only to sustain injuries in the attempt. Then, and this is the really crazy bit, the car straight up disappeared, just like that. Couldn't even drive it if you wanted to. But I'll bet if it ever does show up again, the next person to try and drive it will end up much worse off than they'd be if they didn't. Coming in number 3, we've got a ghost crash. While the car itself might not be cursed, there's definitely some haunting going on here. Back in the early 2000s, police discovered a car that had crashed about 5 months earlier. Inside were the remains of a decomposing body killed by the car veering off the road and crashing into the woods. That doesn't sound too odd, right? A crash happened, nobody was around to see it, and the cops found the results months down the line. But here's the weird part. People kept calling in and reporting headlights swerving off the road right at that very location. Every time the cops went out to see though, they found no evidence of an accident. Eventually, after plenty of what they assumed were prank calls, they did an in-depth search of the area, finally coming across the wreckage. Some say that the spirit of the man inside the car was trying to lead people to his location so he could be discovered and put to rest. The car in question was a Vauxhall Astra, so if you're ever in or around one, just keep an eye out for spirits. Coming in number 2, we've got John F. Kennedy's Limo. Any car involved with a death will generate some rumors about curses. However, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and guess that the number of deaths in cars caused by accidents and collisions outnumber those caused by assassination. Just maybe, right? This Lincoln 74A convertible was meant to be the ultimate in presidential locomotion. For whatever reason though, it was never made bulletproof. Plenty of other upgrades were added to it, but never one meant to stop bullets. Huh. Well, we all know how that played out in the end. After Kennedy's death, the limo was still used as a presidential vehicle for almost a decade, albeit with some major changes in look and feel. It was phased out over time and ended up in a museum, but to this day people claim to see shadowy figures hanging out near it. The most common claim is that a figure dressed in gray can be seen standing next to the car. Usually this apparition appears in November, but it has been spotted during other months. And finally at number 1, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's Grafenstift Double Phaeton. That is a mouthful, and a wildly important vehicle when you consider the course of world history. Many blame this car for the beginning of World War I, although that might be a bit of a stretch. See, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife had narrowly avoided being assassinated by Bosnian hitmen. Being the classy statespeople they were, they decided to go to the hospital and visit those who had been injured in the attempt on their lives. Their car stalled out in front of a cafe where one of the assassins had stopped to get a drink. Seeing the Archduke in a motionless car, right there, he took the opportunity and gunned him down. This was the tipping point that pushed nations into the First World War. So if you firmly believe in concrete cause and effect, you can probably blame all the deaths in that war on this one vehicle. Gnarly. From there, it would change hands about 14 more times, claiming over a dozen lives in assorted accidents and mechanical failures. So even when it works, and even when it's not in the hands of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, this car is cursed.
Number 5 on this list is King Tut's mask. The curse of King Tut is one of the most famous curses to surround a tomb ever. King Tut was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who boasted one of the most ornate tombs in history. This tomb carried a curse though, and those who entered it suffered fatal consequences. On the pyramids of Giza, there's a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." This curse stuck with those who entered. It all started with Howard Carter, the leader of the team, whose canary was eaten by a cobra the second that they first entered the tomb. Then the person who financed the whole excavation died shortly afterwards. And from there, a domino effect occurred where many others involved suffered horrible tragedies or passed away. Some speculate though that it wasn't actually the act of opening the tomb that sparked this curse, but it was what they did with King Tut's mask. King Tut had a burial mask on when he was mummified and put in his tomb. The mask is beautiful. It's meant to resemble the person it's on so that the gods can recognize him and bring him up to heaven. Inside the mask is a bunch of oils and materials that are said to help preserve the body. All of this is all well and good, but on the back of the mask is an inscription. This inscription is said to be a curse similar to the one on the pyramids of Giza. Well, if that wasn't enough, then there's a rumor this mask was broken during the excavation process and had to be reassembled when they took it back to their headquarters. Opening the tomb is already problematic, but to then break the mask of King Tut that has a curse inscribed on it, that's just asking for trouble. Number 4 on this list is King Casimir IV's coffin. King Casimir was born in 1427 into royalty. By 1440, when he would have only been 13, Casimir was named the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and only 7 years later in 1447 became the fully fledged King of Poland. He stood as the King of Poland right up until the day he died. Oftentimes, kings don't make it right up until their death, but King Casimir's success was pretty historic. He's known in Polish history as being one of the most politically active and prosperous kings to ever rule over their country. During his reign, he won several wars, recovered territories for Poland, and made their royal family one of the leaders in Europe. Due to all of the glory that he received in his life, it was only fitting that he have a tomb that reflected this. He died when he was 65 years old in 1492 and was put to rest in the chapel of Wawel Castle. There he lay for roughly 500 years until 1973. Researchers opened the tomb to find a horrible surprise. The researchers opened this tomb and investigated the mummification process and all the artifacts he was buried with. They took his body and coffin out of this place and brought it back to their lab. What they didn't realize though was that this coffin had a curse to it. It's estimated that over 15 people died who worked on researching this body and this coffin. It took a while before they realized what was causing this death, but eventually they discovered the error of their ways. You see, the coffin was cursed, but it wasn't cursed with anything ghostly, it was cursed with Aspergillus flavus. Cursed is also a misleading word to use in this instance as well, because Aspergillus flavus is actually a pathogenic fungus. A fungus that when exposed to people can become a killer. For a long time, people thought that there truly was an ancient curse surrounding this coffin, but it was actually this fungus that kept preying on people's immune systems. Eventually, King Casimir's body was taken and put back into his tomb, but not before the damage had been done and over 15 people had lost their lives. Number 3 on this list is the Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall wasn't necessarily from a tomb, but it was recovered from a grave, so I think it still counts in this criteria. Burton Agnes Hall was built in the 17th century in Yorkshire. It was built by Sir Henry Griffith, who had 3 daughters he loved very much. They all moved there and were very happy for a time. One of the daughters was named Anne, and Anne loved to explore the outdoors. One day though, when she was exploring, a gang of robbers got to her and they beat her and left her for dead. When the family found her, there was barely any life left in her. They brought her back to their home, but her time on this world wasn't long. While she was dying, she had a very strange request to her 2 remaining sisters. She begged them to take her head and put it within the walls of the hall so that she could always be there with her family. She was dying, so they agreed, but neither of them actually intended on taking their sister's head off and keeping it in their home. A few days later, she died, and they buried her outside the hall without keeping their promise. This was a big mistake though. After she was buried, strange noises and banging sounds started happening all over the hall. Screams and crying could be heard throughout, and moans the family couldn't ignore. Eventually they gave in, dug Anne up, and took off her head. They brought it into the hall and the disturbances, they stopped. But years passed and the ownership of this hall changed. The new owners, they had no interest in a dead girl's skull in their home and got rid of it, but sure enough, just when they did, the noises and the hauntings started again. Over the centuries, people have tried and tried again to rid themselves of this skull many times, but eventually they always cave and they have to bring it back in. The skull truly is cursed, and it must remain inside the home at all times if you ever want any peace from Anne's spirit. Number 2 on this list is King Tut's statuettes. King Tut's tomb didn't just have one cursed item, it had multiple. His burial mask is pretty widely known, but many don't know the story of 2 statuettes that also came from this tomb. These were 2 small bronze statues found inside the tomb. One of them with their hand over their heart and the other one with their hand over their mouth. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the initial excavation, gave these to a friend as a gift. This was meant to be in good faith and a friendly gesture, but he had no idea the trouble that they would cause. The name of the family is omitted in this story to protect their integrity, and the person who received the statues is simply referred to as James. James received these statues and brought them back to America with him, but then started to suffer the consequences. Once wildly successful, James started to lose everything: his company, his money, his family. James went through 3 failed marriages, a complete collapse of his immense fortune, and finally died of illness without ever realizing these statues were part of the problem. He left them to his grandson in his will, and the curse continued. When his grandson took hold of these statues, he was a decorated Olympian, but he also suffered a serious fall from grace. Injuries, other accidents, and failed business ventures plagued the grandson from the second that he took hold of these statues until finally he called the museum. He donated them to the museum so that they could be put with some of the other King Tut pieces and the curse could finally be lifted from his family. Now, it's certainly possible that this was all a coincidence and this family just got down on their luck at the wrong time, but anything involving King Tut has the potential to be cursed, and I wouldn't be surprised if these statues were part of that. Number 1 on this list is the unlucky mummy. The unlucky mummy is an ornate wooden coffin that was found in an ancient Egyptian tomb. This coffin's preservation was remarkable for how old experts thought that it must be. The coffin was said to hold the remains of ancient Egyptian princess Amun-Ra. The legend says that in 1890 some British men stumbled upon this casket at an Egyptian excavation site. There were 4 men and they all suffered greatly right after coming in contact with this coffin. The first man, who initially took ownership of the coffin, was seen leaving his hotel and walking straight into the desert to never be seen again only after 1 day of possessing said casket. The second man on the very next day was accidentally shot and had to have his arm amputated. The third man, when they did eventually get back to Britain, returned to see that all of his life savings were gone. And the last man died from disease shortly after the discovery of this artifact. And just like that, the curse of the unlucky mummy began. Now there are some misconceptions with this mummy. Some people believe that the unlucky mummy got put onto the Titanic ship and that's what caused the Titanic to sink. That was never the case though. In fact, once the coffin got to Britain, it's never left. That doesn't mean that this thing isn't still cursed though. It currently resides at the British Museum in London. Since its arrival there, other rumors about this ancient artifact have come out, such as the untimely death of writer Bertram Fletcher Robinson. He was convinced that there was no curse surrounding this coffin. In fact, he even wrote extensively on that topic, but then he died shortly afterwards. Incidents like this have happened all throughout history, further solidifying the curse around this coffin. With everything that's happened to it, the term unlucky might just be a bit of an understatement.
Starting this list as fantastical as possible, this is a board game commissioned by a vampire. It's said to exist somewhere, but hasn't been rumored to be around since the 70s. Although, if that's true, it's an extraordinarily sturdy board game, as it was created at some point in the 1700s. Jacques de Morte means game of death, of course, and was created to ease the boredom of one Prince Dracula of Wallachia. Our second generation vampire was bored of the ins and outs of daily murder and bloodbath. He wanted a real challenge, one that couldn't be provided by his cushy vampire air lifestyle. So he reached out to the sorcerer Dimitri Diablo, who took up the challenge to create the ultimate supernatural board game of death. He slaved over the coals of hell for over a year before coming up with the definitive death-dealing, dice-rolling, Dracula-pleasing experience. The first playthrough was attended by Dracula, Dimitri, another vampire, a witch, a lichen, and a human. The playing board takes you through a damned castle and surrounding cursed forest. There are dice, riddle cards, and a magic crystal ball to move the game along. Sounds pretty boilerplate for board games, but just you wait. Magical beings will materialize during play and attack the participants. Demons, poltergeists, vampires, werewolves, zombies, and more will show up as active astral projections. While warding off these aggressors, players will quest for the devil's unholy grail, said to give a pure evil soul the ultimate power while damning the rest straight to hell. High stakes to say the least. On this initial playthrough, only Dracula and Dimitri survived, to the prince's great delight. After a while, as all princes do, Dracula got bored of his new toy and sent it off to the human world for a laugh. Humans, without the powers associated with being a vampire prince, are easily haunted and possessed by the beings that inhabit this game, causing all sorts of trouble. Coming back to that last sighting in the 70s, it killed 43 people, despite only 6 actively playing. Although, it did happen in Iowa, which at least added some excitement to their dry, boring lives. Sorry Iowa, it's not you, it's me. Coming in at number 4, Boards and Beans. Okay, this one isn't any one specific board game, but it is an entire haunted board game cafe. You should probably avoid playing for too long here unless you want to adopt a little ghost to take home with you. Back in 2016, the owners of a Regina-based board game cafe started noticing some strange happenings around their store. They saw a little girl looking out the window. Doesn't seem too spooky, right? In fact, at first, she thought it was her granddaughter. But then her granddaughter walked in from the other side of the room, scaring her absolute pants off. After this, many other sightings took place in the board game cafe. Customers would complain about strange noises and that they had been touched by an unseen presence during their time in the coffee shop. Multiple sightings of a new employee behind the counter were reported as well, but there was no new employee to speak of. Ghosts would cause mischief as well, opening their industrial dishwasher and sending baked goods flying across the room. There's also a supposed video of a specter moving through the store as well, causing footage of the owner to distort in an odd way, but that is yet to be fully explained. Eventually, the paranormal and supernatural team was called in, leading to the debunking of some of the claims. However, the investigators did still find some unexplainable things and went away not being 100% sure what to think about it. So if you want to play some normal board games in a haunted environment, Boards and Beans is the place for you. Coming at number 3, Ouija. What would a cursed board game list be without the classic spirit talking board? You take a board with the alphabet printed on it, and numbers 1 through 10, yes or no, and you put a planchette on that board, and then you put your fingers on the planchette, and bam! Paranormal experience. Interestingly enough, they were regarded as simple parlor games when they first came out until American spiritualist Pearl Curran popularized their use as a divining tool during World War I. Since then, the spooky Ouijas have grown in popularity as spirit mediums. Churches have publicly warned against their use, claiming that demonic possession is a very real risk, although occultists tend to be more divided. On one hand, there are plenty of positive aspects to contacting the spirit realm. You can learn a lot or get closure from a loved one. However, they also know that inexperienced or reckless users do have a higher chance of being attacked or possessed by otherworldly entities. The scientific community remains unconvinced though. They believe Ouija to be a form of pseudoscience, with unconscious movements controlling the pointer through something they call the ideomotor effect. Whoever you believe, there's no denying the popularity and notoriety of a Ouija board. Demons and malevolent spirits have been reported to show up, especially in the last decade or so. One of the more popular tales is that of Demon Zozo, who we've done a video on in the past. Go check it out. A man claims that his daughter was almost drowned thanks to Zozo's influence, and also that she got very sick with an undiagnosable illness. There have also been stories of folks not respecting or even outright laughing at demons they've conjured and paying the price big time. Don't mess with the Ouija. Coming in at number 2, Beyond the Gates. Remember VCR board games? You would set up a board with all the pieces and then fire a tape into your VCR and click play and it would make that whirring noise, and then it would instruct you on how to proceed. You could pause it at certain times to make sure that the timing was right, and they always had the most ridiculous mascots / hosts. Yeah, those were the days. Beyond the Gates is one of these, found in a family's old video shop. A pair of brothers discovered it while going through their estranged, deceased alcoholic father's video store. When they play it, the host, Evelyn, will ask if they're willing to risk their souls. She also asks about their father and has creepily specific knowledge about the players. So of course they turn off the tape, but soon they find themselves waking up at 3:13 a.m., drawn to the cathode ray tube TV. To win the game, they must collect 4 keys, each of which is hidden somewhere nasty. After pulling keys out of drifter, midriff, and police heads, they face off against some nasty ghouls in a secret gated dimension in their basement. At this point, it's play or die. When they ask the proprietor of a game shop about the game, it's revealed that no one has ever beaten it in the past. And whenever the game is returned to the shop, it's not the players doing the exchange. Gotta love a cursed game return policy though, just in case. If you didn't know, this hypothetical board game originated in a 2016 movie of the same name, Beyond the Gates. If Barbara Crampton is gonna steal my soul, so be it. And at number 1, Rap Rat. He's Rap Rat, and he's the boss. Better listen up, kids. Another VHS board game. This one was meant for kids, done in a similar style to Mousetrap. An anonymous storyteller posted his experience with the game online, detailing all of these sick and twisted details. First time he and his siblings played, the little brother left the room crying immediately after seeing Rap Rat. This hideous mascot barely resembled a rat, with ears too big, a swollen mouth, and 2 rotten, pointy teeth. The thing that scared them the most though were his glassy fish eyes. He screamed, "Wait your turn," in a demonic low-pitched voice before flashing terrifying images on the screen. A tarantula, a hornet stinging someone's eyes, a pit of writhing cobras, a bloodied syringe, you name it. Naturally, they got rid of the tape right away, but not before seeing enough nightmare fuel to last a lifetime. Years later, the same guy found it in his childhood bedroom. He and his girlfriend decided to watch it for laughs, but didn't end up laughing. They were even more terrifying images than before, and when they tried to take the tape out of the player, it burned their hands. A neighbor even called the police because a strange person was scratching at their front door. Needless to say, they wanted to know what the hell was happening. After doing some research, they found out that a child had died in the sweatshop where the rat puppet was made. The child's mother laid a curse upon the production and claimed to summon a fear demon. Her last words to the folks at the company were, "Apparat will curse you." So of course, the big shots over there had a chuckle and named their mascot after a loose anagram of the demon. Apparat, Rap Rat. Smart move. Now anyone who sees Rap Rat will be unable to escape him. Even if you see a normal version of the rat, he could still be lurking in the shadows, waiting to reveal his true, horrible self.